Hey, Composing Gloves here, and today I'm going to show you how to reverse engineer a sound. Not necessarily make a sound that's in your head. And if you want me to, I'll make a video about that because that's like quite the topic that I think a lot of people just don't understand. But I was actually asked, how do I use Edison? When someone gives me a sound to make, how do I use Edison to sort of see what I'm going to do? The answer is I don't use Edison that much. I do use it a bit, and I use it for key factors, but Edison is not as useful. It's super useful for particular things, but what's more useful about reverse engineering a sound is one, first, you listen to your sound. You're like, all right, what's the deal? If it's in a mix, you have this challenge that has been mixed and mastered, and so it's going to sound different. Then you have to come up with some sort of theory about how, like, what type of synthesis did they use, what type of post, what if you happen to know the artist, what kind of DAW do they prefer to work in, what are the plugins that are most likely the ones they chose to use. If you can get down to the exact plugin chain and everything, they're going to be way closer to the correct start. If you can nail down their process, you're good to go. And so a lot of being able to reverse engineer sounds comes from basic sound design knowledge. I have like courses for this. I have sometimes it's rhythmic elements that throw people off, because when you're making a sound, there's going to be some major parts, like the rhythm of the sound is a major part. The timbre of the sound, the tonal change, any filter movements, resonance movements, the notes of the sound. And in rhythm, I'd break down rhythm into timbral rhythmic changes, so changes in timbre, and rhythmic changes is in the note, the actual rhythm the thing is at. Because sometimes you create the rhythm purely off of timbral changes, and that creates your rhythm. And so those are sort of the main pieces we have to deal with. But here I have an isolated sound. Another thing is you'll often, at least I've been dealing with entire mixes where I look at it and it's buried in my mix. So I have to sort of pick it out. So Edison is not as useful in that regard. And this really goes for anything that you're going to look at it through some sort of an analyzer. You got to be able to see like the main characteristics. A lot of this just comes from looking at the sounds a bunch. So here's the sound. It's a Vengeance one-shot sound. So if I drag it in here, this is my waveform. This is not very useful. If you hit, what is it? S. Here we go. S. You can see the spectrum view. Now I have it on, it's basic. There's a couple different spectrum views. There's one that's like extra clear or something. I can't remember what it's called. And extra clear is fine. I find it harder to notice general patterns in extra clear. This is a lot easier because you can see general motions. Humans, I learned this from a Vsauce video. Humans are better at seeing percentages. Like if you ask, I think it was like a 2-year-old, from 0 to 10, what was in the middle, they'd say 3 because logarithmically they would be correct. I believe it was 3. I don't even remember right now. But it's just a cool thing to notice is that humans, we are better observing patterns. So I go at it from that point of view. Like, how can I see this where patterns are the most easily displayed? And so here we have 4 notes. That's not hard. The rhythm on this one's easy. So not a hard rhythm. We notice here that we've got our spectrum. We notice there's a gap here. So if you're doing a timbral thing, it looks like they have a separate sub engaged. And this sub, when I zoom in, this sub looks like it is a sine tone. I could be wrong. It could perhaps have a very close harmonic, but it looks pretty sine tone-ish to me. You can see but the sub, you can see does not pitch bend. You can see there's light evidences of pitch bend in the timbre. So this means the sub is not pitch bending with it. Now, if we take a listen, you can hear going dun like a straight sound. And the laser, this content, you can also see it here. Looks like there's a content change here. So that's something we need to be aware of when we're making this sound, is the sub's going to be straight and the main meat of it is the upper end harmonic content is going to bend. That's going to be the bend. We'll also notice that this bend appears to be some sort of a filter movement, because it appears like there might be 2 sounds on this, because we see the straight line and the content remains consistent. Like I'm looking at this brighter section right here. So we see this line. That's very clear. That's just like, it looks like it's just a pitch bend. It's just a pitch bend of a tone, probably a sine tone, but they have harmonics. You can see that there's harmonics that are being brought in at the end. And so there's some sort of a bend that encourages a timbral change. So that's something we need to put away in our book. And most of this you can get from listening to it. Once you've done enough sound design, it's all pretty obvious. It looks like they very obviously have some sort of reverb or delay. there's a reverb on there. Listening to it's extra obvious. There's a reverb on it. We see that the upper end has a content change that matches our pitch bend, but we also see that this other stuff is consistent. This like mid yellow content. This is all consistent. Now this is kind of detailed stuff you're not going to be able to really get out of a full mix. It's just there's going to be too many other sounds mucking up everything right here. So we have sort of an advantage with this sort of a take on things. So this sort of a thing, the timbral content looks like it could be achieved easily through additive or subtractive synthesis. It's a Vengeance thing. I have not researched what they use to make Vengeance. I might go look that up because then I'd be like, oh, they use this plugin, so I'd go at it with a particular plugin. Other than this, I could see a Harmor or Citrus. I'm not actually going to reverse engineer anything right now because that stuff, it just takes forever to do it right. If you want to get really close, because you spend all your time trying to get this really right, this sound that's just like this one, I can just sometimes it takes a long time and you just got to call it done. But the cool thing is you'll gain a lot more experience, and almost always you'll come across like 30 other really cool sounds that you can use besides this one. In fact, you'll probably come across sound you like more than this one. But so we have this. So if I were to make this would be like a separate tone. So there'd be two tones. I'd have one tone that forms this basis, maybe three, because this sub looks really loud. It's like you can hear it pretty clearly too. And I'd put a bend in there. It sounds like FM to me. So that would be the method I'd go about it. It sounds FM-ish to me, this particular kind of a content thing. This just looks like an envelope on the top. So Citrus probably created an envelope for a separate out that's being modulated to match the pitch envelope. So anyways, so that's that sound. Let's pick another one. Ooh, that one sounds kind of fun. This one, just off hearing it, you can hear there's reverb on all of these, probably because they're all in the same mix. This one is, now if they used, I could see doing this with Harmor. It sounds like log distortion. See, now that's just something that's in my audio tool, like brain kit. Like I just know what log distortion sounds like, or ribbon. This is something that I could get out of Harmor. It sounds like it's a really low note, and they layered it with a higher note. And now on this one, we can see our harmonic series. On this one, we've got a low tone. We've got another low tone, but we can see it's kind of blurred. It's not like the other one. Our main content's right here. We see there's some sort of beating going on between two tones. So it's so low. One tone is so low that you can hear the oscillations. Like listen to it real closely for that really low tone. And it's just short enough so that it's not a big deal. But if you were to hit a tone, like I'll show you. This is stuff that you're just going to have to kind of know. But if we go down lower, let me use my MIDI keyboard. You can hear the clicks in the oscillation. And so stuff like that, whatever this tone is, it's been distorted. When you distort something like this, it becomes an interesting deal. So, and we could add in, what they might have done is added in a sub to a sound that was already there. So they might have, because there's clearly two tones. Because if we listen to it, we have this, so we have some noise. It's important to note that there's noise. There's some randomness going on if we listen. Sounds like that's mostly a result of the reverb. So they picked a particular kind of reverb. It's a short reverb tail, just from experience. I just know that that's a short reverb. It sounds like they cut the low out of the reverb because it appears mostly in the high end. So the cut, it looks like they used some sort of a filter here, that just whatever roll-off filter they had, it looks like they had maybe like a 6 dB or 3 dB roll-off per octave. So we have evidence of a harmonic series. This looks like a saw series. It looks like every harmonic is present, except for when we get to the top. You can see the two tones are just slamming against each other. So in this one, I'd have, and actually it sounds like there might even be three tones on this, but it's probably been done with one patch and then just some EQing on the two different voices. So one patch is a low tone or a subtone, and it's probably one patch, one sound with a tone been lowered. And yeah, so I'm just giving you like sort of how I would approach it. This is the sound I would see myself pulling Harmor out for. I've been asked for quite a number of Skrillex sounds, and he uses Massive, so I go to Massive. That's just why I know they use those things. And Massive has filter modules that are really unique to Massive that would be difficult to make in other things. Like, could it be done? Yeah, but is it as easy? No, because they use things like Scream Filter, which has these weird feedback modules and resonance capabilities that filters are just, these is not here. It's a thing that's unique to Massive. So could you do it? Like, once again, yes, but is it like easy? Well, it's probably not as intuitive or easy. It's like, okay, let's take this one. So this one's got, it's a wobble. We could see that the tone, it looks like it is it looks like a filter. It looks like whatever filter they're using, it has a pretty sharp transition band, because when it moves with it, and it does not induce resonance. There's no big line. Resonance is a boost in the cutoff of the filter. So it looks more like a volume. So if I were to do this, I'd get a resonance filter. I'd get a filter. It is a low pass filter, because the high end is the stuff that's going away. And I would grab that. We see that we have enormous bass, a big sub. So we'd have a separate sub. Like, listen to the sub. The sub's there the whole time. Like, it's dun. And so this may be two notes, dun dun. It looks like they articulated them separately, which means that it could be a patch that either they automated the filter move, or the filter has been set to move at that particular rate every time you hit a key. They might have used an envelope on the filter. This is a pretty straightforward thing. It looks like the distortion profile, they started with saw wave. That would be my guess. And the EQ, you just EQ it a little bit. Let's find another one. Ooh, that's fun. That's a fun one. So here we've got, this is a easy one. There's not easy. I'm going to tell you right now, anytime you try and make a sound that sounds like someone else's sound is not going to be easy. Like, it could be a freaking easy sound. And this is like a sine wave or a square wave, something really easy. But any sounds like these, they have distortion profiles. So you also got to keep in mind they have post EQ, they've got compression, they've got all these other things that really change the sound. And so you've got to become familiar with those things. But here we see we have two separate tones. There's a thing in the middle that's like gone. And so we could either accomplish this by moving it an octave apart, which just looks to be like there's some sort of an interval between two voices. So I'd probably an octave for it to sound nice. This is a pretty straightforward thing. It's got a click at the end, and there's no reverb. We can very clearly see there's no reverb, and you can hear it too. I would go at this with Harmor as well. This is the sound I'd go for Harmor. It's a distortion profile. It's a saw wave being distorted. It might be mixed as two saw waves going against each other. Like, let me go up here. So that's the note. And if I were to, let's take this one up. And now, interesting things happen when you choose intervals of the fundamental, because now this is essentially acting as a fundamental, and this is acting as a ratio to the fundamental. And what's cool is you can actually see the content here, but you can only see it as a whole voice. So we're getting pretty close to the content of it. I've already got distortion on it. It sounds like this, it's getting the main, this one sounds like there's a movement. No, it's a steady thing. And so anyways, you come in here and you pick the note. Now, if you're doing like a full mix, like I don't have an example of that one, but you'd pick the sound out. You'd get what information you can. Does it look like it's a square wave? Square waves are easy because they're every other harmonic, and the harmonics are pretty bright. Triangle waves are easy if you know how to look for a square wave, because it looks like a square wave, only the harmonics trail off into oblivion, because the harmonic nature of a triangle wave, the overtones are much weaker. Like, let me open up a citrus. Citrus. Now, if we were to come over here, oh, here we go. Oh, this is a saw wave. So if we were to go to like triangle wave and convert to sine harmonics, as you can see, the harmonics get softer much faster versus a square wave. Whoops, let's go to a square and convert to sine harmonics. You see a square wave much louder, and it lasts way longer. Every other harmonic. And there are cool things like duty cycles and stuff with square waves. Now, the saw wave, it looks like this. And just knowing that this is basic stuff that you're going to have to know if you want to be remotely successful, is you got to be able to gather some sort of a starting point, some sort of a waveform, which is one reason why massive is kind of difficult. But one thing that you also need to know is, while these sounds, a lot of things start off on saw wave by default, and vocoders, if you're not familiar with vocoders, you need to become familiar with them, because they're the source of a lot of growls. On that last sound, I did a Skrillex sound, this robot bass thing at the end, it goes doo 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 doo. It sounds like that. It's from Make It Burn Them. I did a weird thing with a scream filter and a couple performers in a lo-fi sound, and I listened to it and it sounds like it might be vocoded, but I've heard similar textures achieved via square distortion in the scream filter. So it's just a weird deal. So yeah. So you just need, there's a lot of basic background knowledge you need to really be successful at something like this, but it's not like impossible. And if you just sit here and make educated, observations, then yeah. And any research you can get on the jazz, like if you can find other people's attempts at it, if you can find, a forum where people talk about its creation and you just try stuff. Most people, they just don't want to sit down and try it. Most people probably do just fine making some cool sounds, but they don't want to spend all that time sitting there trying to make it. So, that's up to them. But yeah, so that's how you do that. Now this applies for everything. So let's see if there's, now this one sounds like a voice and you can see Foreman's qualities pretty easily in here. So I would not try and synthesize something like this. I'd find a voice. It sounds like it's been pitched. You can see the formances are pretty squished together, and there's some unusual pitch movement like right over here. And I would just get a voice, pitch it up, and do stuff. So there's things that the technique is the important thing with something like that. The bass waveform is not. And massive, normally if it's a pretty distorted thing, the bass waveform needs to just be close. It doesn't need to be the exact waveform, because once you distort and everything, it's going to take on that profile. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on how to reverse engineer sounds. What are some, let me see if I can find one other cool wobble kit. Like this. This, by the way, this to me screams Massive. You want to know why? Because Massive has a performer. This is another thing. You just need to know your VSTs. Massive has this performer thing, and if you listen, it goes do 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 wanna, and that to me sounds like a pattern where they have dun 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 wah, dun dun, like, and then it just loops. Listen to it, and you can see resonance movements, which is like, I'm willing to bet they stuck that performer on an envelope, maybe a filter with just some resonance, a fast filter cutoff. And yeah, that's my guess on what they did. This certain sounds, you could tell if it's Massive most of the time. Like Massive sounds like Massive, like it has a sound associated with it. So I would go at that one in Massive. Like that's just me. So what do you think? This one has a phaser. Phasers are easy to tell because they have holes. If there's a big hole, this one, I could say phaser. It sounds like there might be smaller holes. You can see there's some unusual frequency moving content, probably from a result of the distortion and where the phaser is, because filters will shift content. So that would be something that would happen to you. You probably wouldn't even need to know that to make this sound. But phasers are easy to tell because they have holes. You could accomplish the same thing through just a bandstop filter, because you can see it's a pretty consistent thing. So this means the phaser is re-triggering on each sound to achieve a consistent hit. So oscillator sync, something you need to know about. So yeah, anyways, what do you think? What are your opinions on some of what I said? Maybe like, what do you do to sort of go at it? I mean, the big thing is once you start going, you start off with your bass technique. The rest of it's just fine tuning it to try and get it as close as possible. But yeah, what do you do? What's your methodology? I'd love to hear it. Post a video, put it in the description, or just post a comment. Hopefully not a long one, but a good comment. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.